So did you see that press conference yesterday with Attorney General Pam Bondi, in which she announced that she was filing charges against the governor of New York and the Attorney General of New York? Well, she's full of crap, as I'm going to explain in this video. So why don't we begin with watching just a small clip from the press conference where she makes this announcement. So let's take a look at this.
Delay. We're here today because we have filed charges against the state of New York. We have filed charges against Kathy Hochul. We have filed charges against Letitia James and Mark Schroeder, who is with DMV. This is a new DOJ, and we are taking steps to protect Americans, American citizens, and angel moms, like the mom standing right behind me, who you're going to hear from in a moment.
Okay, let's stop that there. Because from what I saw of the press conference, now I didn't watch this whole thing live. All I saw was news coverage, and I looked for clips that I could use in this video here today. And from what I saw, and there may be more, but from what I saw, this was all she said about these charges that she supposedly filed. Now, if you're filing charges against the governor of the state of New York, that's kind of a big deal. You'd think you'd spend a little bit more time explaining that, right? But of course not. She goes straight into the propaganda. That woman that she was about to introduce, who was standing behind her, you know, that poor woman had a daughter, a 13-year-old daughter of hers, murdered by an MS-13 gang member. And so, of course, Pam Bondi, because this is what the Trump administration does, Pam Bondi would use her as a propaganda tool. That's why she was there. And from what I saw, she came up and she told the story of what happened to her daughter, and she was emotional, and you're supposed to get very angry about what happened to her daughter, which you should be. It's an outrage what happened to her daughter. But you are supposed to then blame Democrat politicians. You're supposed to blame people like the governor of New York, that somehow they are the reason that this woman's daughter was murdered. That's the purpose of having her there. And it's disgusting, which is why I didn't want to play anymore. But let's deal with the substance of what Bondi says here. So she goes out of her way several times in just that brief clip to say that she was filing charges. Now, that is grossly misleading, if not outright a lie. Because when you say that you're filing charges, that implies criminal charges. And that did not happen here. There have been no criminal charges. She filed a lawsuit, a civil lawsuit. And you do not refer to the filing of a civil lawsuit as filing charges. Okay, Pam Bondi knows that. So why did she choose the words filing charges? Well, because this is fan service for the Trump cult. That's what this is. Because this is what the Trump cult wants to hear. This is what they want to see. They want to see Democrat politicians around the country arrested, indicted, arrested, and imprisoned. That's what they want to see. And she knows, Pam Bondi, she knows that if she says that she filed charges against the governor of New York and the attorney general, that the cult will think she means criminal charges. And they will love it. That's the whole purpose here. She also knows that the cult is far too stupid to look into the matter anymore and to try to understand what was really going on here. And so Bondi knows she can get full propaganda value and be celebrated by the cult for saying that she filed charges, because they'll never know any different. Fox News will never tell them any different. None of the propaganda sources of information that they watch are going to tell them any different. So that's why she does it. She wants them to think she filed criminal charges when no such thing happened. So when I saw these comments from Bondi, first I knew she was full of crap in leaving this implication that she was filing criminal charges. I knew this was just a lawsuit. I knew why she was choosing those words. But I thought when I heard that she was filing a broad lawsuit challenging the whole notion of New York being a quote unquote sanctuary jurisdiction. But it was not, when I actually looked into this, it's not actually a broad lawsuit at all. It's very narrowly tailored, and it deals only with the issuance of driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants, and for not giving the federal government just blanket access to the New York database on driver's license and things like that. So that's what the lawsuit is about. And so let me just read you a little bit of a write-up here. The Trump administration has filed a lawsuit against the state of New York and its governor, Kathy Hochul, and Attorney General Letitia James, alleging a failure to comply with federal law by shielding illegal immigrants. So what this is going to be, and I haven't read the lawsuit itself. I don't have time, to be honest with you. I do not have time to go find every single lawsuit and read them in their entirety. It's just, I would do nothing with my days but that, and I just don't have time. But I don't need to read the whole thing because I know what's in there. This is going to be a supremacy clause lawsuit. They're saying that the state of New York is violating federal law, and federal law, given the supremacy clause, trumps, to use a phrase, trumps state law. And so because the state law conflicts with the federal law, that these state laws are unconstitutional or they're invalid per the supremacy clause. That's going to be the basis of the lawsuit. But this is not some sort of big blockbuster lawsuit. It's narrowly tailored, but you wouldn't understand that watching Pam Bondi's press conference. You'd think that this is a really big deal. First of all, you'd think there are criminal charges against the governor of New York, but beyond that, you'd think it's a really big deal, and it's not. Let me read a little more here. New York Governor Kathy Hochul called Attorney General Pam Bondi's immigration-related lawsuit against the state, quote, worthless and publicity-driven, adding that New York is not backing down. Quote, earlier today, Attorney General Pam Bondi marched in front of television cameras for a dramatic media briefing to announce she was filing charges against New York State related to our immigration laws. Hours later, when legal papers were shared with reporters, we learned this was smoke and mirrors. The Department of Justice was filing a routine civil action about a law passed in 2019 that has been upheld by the courts time and again. Here are the facts. Our current laws allow federal immigration officials to access any DMV database with a judicial warrant. That's a common sense approach that most New Yorkers support. But there's no way I'm letting federal agents or Elon Musk's shadowy Doge operation get unfettered access to the personal data of any New Yorker in the DMV system. Okay, she's well within her rights as governor of New York, and the Assembly of New York, the legislature, is well within their rights to pass laws like this. Let's talk about, because this is going to come up, and even though this was not nearly the big blockbuster lawsuit that Pam Bondi, seemed to indicate it was going to be, but nonetheless, we're going to see these kinds of challenges to state laws around the country in the years to come. Generally speaking, they're going to be about sanctuary jurisdictions, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, different sanctuary type laws. What are we talking about? Because I got a question the other day. What is a sanctuary jurisdiction? Well, a sanctuary jurisdiction is simply a jurisdiction to one degree or another that says we are not going to help federal law enforcement enforce federal law related to immigration. That's it. We're not helping you. Our cops, our state police, our local police, whatever, our law enforcement agencies are not going to help you enforce federal law. That's all they're saying. That's what a sanctuary jurisdiction is. And you know what? That's called federalism. And in our system, a state has every right not to help the federal government enforce federal law. That's not their job. That's the job of federal law enforcement and federal immigration officials. Here's the thing. Without spending too much time getting into the constitutional weeds of all of this, here's what you need to know. The federal government has no authority to tell states what to do. Period. The states don't work for the federal government. I know a lot of people mistakenly think that our system is one where the federal government outranks the states and state officials are subservient to federal officials. That's not true at all. They're two separate, sovereigns, if you will, right? We should not look at it this way, top down, where here's the federal government here and here's the state, and the federal government controls, outranks the states. It's much more like this. Okay, the federal government has its role and authority. State governments have their role and authority. And by the way, the state governments have much more power in our system under a much broader area of potential issues to regulate than the federal government does. You may have heard the federal government referred to as a government of limited enumerated authority. And that simply means, it's correct, and what it means is, the federal government only has authority to do that which the Constitution specifically authorizes it to do. And then per the 10th Amendment, anything that is not specifically given to the federal government as a power that they don't have. And anything else is reserved to the states or to the people. That's the 10th Amendment. And so the states have much broader authority over a much greater range of issues than the federal government does. And so it's like this, not like this, okay? And so the state governments do not take orders from the federal government. So say the president called up the chief of the state police of the state of New York and tried to give him an order. Hey, I want you to go do this for me. The chief of police of New York can tell Trump to go F himself. I don't work for you. Go F yourself. And he'd be perfectly within his rights to do so because he doesn't take orders from the president of the United States. Okay? That's our system. And in our system, the federal government has the authority to enforce federal law, but they have no authority to force states to enforce federal law. Now, states can help if they want to, but that's their choice. And that's just simply that's a basic fundamental in our system. Now, and this is, by the way, that's precedent of the Supreme Court too. And, because I know a lot of people might be thinking, yeah, well, now there's going to be lawsuits, and once it gets up to the Supreme Court, they're going to give Donald Trump everything he wants. I'm not going to predict the Supreme Court anymore. They're so damn corrupt. But I would be surprised if they did, because the body of case law that these particular Republican justices on the Supreme Court right now, the body of case law that they themselves have helped to promulgate, stands for this proposition. This is states' rights. I mean, haven't Republicans like forever been talking about states' rights? That's what we're talking about here. Federalism, states' rights. The right of the states to say, F you, federal government, you don't control us, we can make our own decisions, you can't make us do anything. Okay? And so, for these justices to side with the Trump administration on this stuff would be for them to completely overrule their own precedent. All of the principles they've said they've stood on their entire careers, they would have to turn on a dime in order to give the Trump administration what they want here. And by the way, can we please stop referring to today's Republican Party as conservative? I mean, this is just one of the myriad issues where Republicans have done a complete 180 on every single issue they've pretended to care about, every principle they've pretended to hold, right? States' rights, federalism. They're not for that anymore. Now they want a absolute authority in the federal government so that the federal government can dictate, can essentially commandeer state police forces and order them to enforce federal law? Is that really where today's Republican Party is? Yeah, that's where they are. There's a lot you can say about what that is, but you cannot say that that is conservative. It is not. This Republican Party is not conservative in any way. It just pisses me off because words have meaning. I'm sick of these people, pretending to be conservatives. They're fascists. They're fascist authoritarians. And we should stop calling them conservatives because it whitewashes what they really are. They're not conservatives. They're fascist authoritarians. Anyway, there were some more things I wanted to discuss here. In terms of this specific lawsuit having to do with driver's licenses and denying the federal government blanket access to state databases and things like that, I don't know the ins and outs of lawsuits come down to the specifics a lot of times. And so you're going to have to read the exact language of the statutes that are at issue here, maybe the exact fact patterns of what might form the basis of the lawsuit to really determine the outcome of these things. And I'm not familiar with all the ins and outs. So I'm not going to make a prediction. But just generally speaking, this is an issue of federalism. And generally speaking, states have the right to refuse to aid federal law enforcement in enforcing federal law. Now, there's an important difference here that you need to keep in mind. Saying that we're not going to help you is one thing, and that's perfectly within their rights. What is not lawful is for state officials to interfere with federal officials in enforcing federal law. If there's any active interference, that's different. That's not a states' rights issue. That's not a federalism issue. That's not legal. That is, that's criminal. You can't interfere with federal law enforcement enforcing federal law. But the feds have zero authority under our Constitution to force state officials to enforce federal law. That's their damn job. You want to enforce federal law? Do it your damn self. That is perfectly that is perfectly within the rights of the states to say to the federal government. You may not like it. You may not think that's the best thing to do, but it's perfectly within their rights to do it.